Hello and welcome to this World Nuclear Association interview. My name is Jonathan Cobb. These interviews are looking at some of the topics that will be discussed at the World Nuclear Association Strategic eForum 2020, a series of webinars that will take place on the 9th, 10th and 11th of September. To find out more about these webinars, including how to register for free, please go to www.worldnuclearforum.com. But for today, I'd like to introduce Canon Bryan, who's Chief Financial Officer of Terrestrial Energy, who are developing the integral molten salt reactor. And I'd also like to introduce Eric Meyer, who's the founder and executive director of Generation Atomic, a nuclear advocacy non-profit group. Canon, Eric, thank you both for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Cheers. Cheers, Jonathan.
Now, Canon, I'd like to ask you the first question. The benefits of nuclear energy are clear. So if governments are looking to help stimulate economies and generate jobs, and they're also looking to meet the imperative of moving to a clean energy system, what is it they need to do to help nuclear energy make the maximum contribution to achieving those objectives?
Yes, thanks, Jonathan. I'm going to provide an answer which is perhaps not expected, but the next generation nuclear technologies have the unique capability of being able to produce carbon neutral synthetic transport fuels at massive scale. It would be tremendously helpful if government could recognize this fact and then pull the levers that are at its disposal to possibly incentivize the fossil fuel industry to make that transition from fossil fuel-based transport fuels to, in fact, carbon neutral synthetic transport fuels that are enabled by the next generation nuclear technology. So a recent example of such a lever, a policy lever, would be in the United States, where they have recently passed the so-called Q45 production tax credit for carbon storage and carbon utilization. So a producer can receive a $35 per ton tax credit, production tax credit, for every ton of carbon that it either captures and stores, or captures and uses in something like a synthetic fuel. So these types of policy levers would be helpful in transitioning away from emission-intensive energy sources to emission-free energy sources.
And Eric, what do you think the government should be doing?
I think Canon's absolutely right. Many governments have plans to address decarbonizing the electricity grid, and indeed some have already been successful in doing so, even decades ago, like Sweden and France, for example. But very few people have an idea how we're actually going to decarbonize the transport and industrial heat sectors. So I think Canon's right. 45Q is a great way to get started there. I think carbon tax and fee and dividend incentives, like are being proposed in the US and other places, are also good starts. It's worthwhile, I think, to note that many of the oil majors are actually pledging to decarbonize as well, but they have no idea how to do it. BP just this year said they want to be net zero in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. It's hard to imagine how that would even be possible without them getting into the carbon neutral fuels game. They have the expertise. I just think they, at this moment, don't have the incentive to actually start pursuing that. And I see a lot of really beneficial partnerships, both for the business community and for the planet, between these two sectors going forward. But the government needs to take the lead.
Now, two of the topics that our eForum will be discussing are finance and costs, perhaps issues that involve both governments, other authorities, and the industry. So, Canon, do you have any thoughts on what needs to be done on those two topics?
Well, I have a finance background, so naturally I do have an opinion on this matter. It is actually my contention that the single biggest constraint facing the nuclear energy industry today for broad deployment is related to finance and cost. The cost structure for new build nuclear power plants today is no longer appropriate for evolving market conditions. So I think there are three things that the industry must do in order to alleviate these constraints. So firstly, conventional nuclear power plants that are being built today, large light water reactor systems, they must achieve the learning efficiencies from building plants in series. They have to really demonstrate to the market that every single plant they are building is cheaper than the last plant that they built. That's tremendously important. They are doing that in China, and it must now be demonstrated in the West in order for markets to respond. Secondly, innovative reactor designs must demonstrate that their cost structures are radically different from the cost structures of conventional plants, so that they can enable smaller economies to be able to make the investments necessary, and for private investment to be able to assume that level of capital risk. So there are, of course, technologies that are being developed today that are attempting to do exactly that. They have radically different cost structures, low capital, upfront capital costs, preferably under $1 billion to construct and license a new plant. And that's competitive with natural gas plants and coal plants. Thirdly, the investment community today knows virtually nothing about how to invest in nuclear technology, and that really has to change. Traditionally, the investment community has not participated in capitalizing the nuclear energy industry. But again, evolving market conditions are changing that. Private investment is going to have to take the lead on funding and capitalizing this sector, particularly new technologies. So it's up to the industry to inform the investment community, to instruct them how to have the infrastructure to be able to invest in these types of technologies.
And Eric, do you have some thoughts on these two issues?
Yeah, I mean, we're right now building a few plants a year per country. It's just not good enough in terms of cost reductions and in terms of addressing the climate challenge. So we got to think big here. Think about how maybe we can get into shipyard construction. Figure out how to churn reactors out, like we've churned other large types of construction projects out in the past. I'm thinking about the airline industry. That's the level of complexity and the level of safety that is expected of a nuclear plant. So I don't see why we shouldn't be able to do that, but it's been elusive so far. So I think Canon's exactly right. It's going to take the industry talking to the investment class to at least get this started so we can get to that point of dramatic cost reductions.
So if the industry and the investment community can work together, if governments do what is needed to be done, if that was all put together, what would success for the nuclear industry look like for you, Eric?
You know, I can't help but think of the Harmony program, which I think is a fantastic start. You know, its goal of adding 1,000 gigawatts of electric nuclear to generate about 25% of the planet's electricity needs by 2050. But I think perhaps we need to be even more ambitious than that, thinking of how much of this decarbonization challenge will fall on the nuclear sector. I think it's a bit of a gamble to assume that renewables will be able to pick up the rest of the slack, both in the electricity sector and in our other sources of emissions. And you know, just looking around, seeing today the grid integration challenges that exist, the siting challenges, it's a big bet to think that renewables will be able to carry the rest of that load. So, you know, maybe we need to be thinking instead of 1,000 gigawatts, 2,000, 3,000. We're going to have to rapidly add nuclear, not only to get to, you know, zero emissions, but to go negative by mid-century if we want to avoid the types of tipping points that climate scientists are talking about, like melting methane or, you know, severe ocean acidification that leaves us explaining to our grandchildren what whales were. We really need to understand how high the stakes are and what nuclear could do and what the responsibility the industry has this century to be the deciding factor in how it goes.
Canon, I wonder what you thought about this.
Yes, as I pointed out earlier, the next generation nuclear technologies have the unique capability of decarbonizing the difficult to decarbonize sectors, like the transport sector, which today is roughly 95% dependent on fossil fuels, and industrial heat sector, which today is over 99% dependent on fossil fuels. Success, in my view, would be a fleet of next generation nuclear reactors, right-sized for industry, providing a judicious fraction of all the industrial heat duties for the manufacturing sector, and a series of modular plants built for the production of synthetic transport fuels that are carbon neutral. They must be very large. They could be very large, and there wouldn't need to be that many of them. In fact, sort of on the order of hundreds. But that would alleviate great strain on emissions and the carbon in the atmosphere. So success looks like, in essence, thousands of reactors around the world, purpose-built, and achieving deep decarbonization.
So, Eric, what more is it that the industry needs to do to maximize its potential?
You know, we talk a lot about innovation in reactor designs, innovation in financing mechanisms, which are both incredibly important. But I don't think we talk enough about innovation in advocacy for nuclear and nuclear technologies. You know, we talk a lot, I think, to our own governments, and even governments are talking to each other about nuclear, but we're not interfacing with the broader industrial community. You know, we go to our own conferences a lot, and we seldom go to other conferences where these types of decarbonization conversations could happen, like concrete conferences, ammonia conferences, steel, chemical processing. All of these conversations are happening without nuclear people in the room, and we need to be there. So I think innovating in the spheres that we advocate is super important. And also innovating differently in our communications with the public. You know, we know that nuclear plants save lives just by being in operation. 2019 research out of Columbia University showed how Japan and Germany, by turning away from nuclear after the Fukushima disaster, ended up causing an additional roughly 28,000 deaths related to fossil fuel pollution. So knowing that, we really need to fight for these existing plants like they are as they are the life-saving machines that they are. Knowing that there are, you know, lives today and our children's lives that are at stake as a result. We shouldn't be content with early shutdowns for economic reasons or political reasons. Fessenheim didn't need to shut down. Indian Point doesn't need to shut down. Pickering, Diablo Canyon. You can list off so many plants that could have had and have decades of their life ahead of them that are shut down early for reasons that don't really make a lot of sense when you take a step back and you realize what's at stake. So as an industry, I think we need to realize the outsized responsibility we have to fight for these things and get creative how we're fighting for these plants. People have been talking about it for years, but hardly anyone has ever painted a containment dome or painted a cooling tower. And just that small step could help the public reimagine what this power source is and what it means. So I like to try to take creative approaches in my advocacy. I got my start singing opera about molten salt reactors on buses and trains in Paris at the climate talks. And I continue that work to today with a collaboration, most recently, with a hip hop artist named Baba Brinkman, who has done work around climate change, around philosophy, politics for many years, and is now kind of dipping his toes into the energy space and is really excited to come out in full support of nuclear so we can make this case in a way where more people will hear it, more people will see it, and imagine it in a way never seen before. So I'm super excited for the opportunity to present that to the audience here, and hopefully find some people who are willing to help fund additional efforts like this in the future.
I'd like to thank you both now, Canon and Eric, for joining us today. Really appreciated the time you've given. Thank you very much. Now, if you want to see more videos, please go to our World Nuclear Association Strategic eForum website, which you can find at www.worldnuclearforum.com. There you'll find information about the panelists, the topics that will be discussed, as well as some of the other videos that we've been recording. But for now, I'd like to thank again Canon and Eric. I'd like to thank you for joining us. And here is Baba Brinkman with Eric Meyer and Bright Future.
Bright future. Blackout, too late to back out. From New York City to Krakow, no turning back now. We demand infinite power that never taps out, and the shutting of all fossil fuel smokestacks down. Don't forget to ask how, use every single tool. Got that solar bling on my roof, all of my neighbors are thinking it's cool. Renewables are beautiful, get them connected to every cottage. But the crucible is, can they get a city level wattage? 10%, maybe 25, until the wind power dies. No flow from a hydro reservoir, then a drought is dry. The sun sets under cloudy skies, out of sight, out of mind. Old King Cole comes out at night. Sunrise capacity surges, crashing the circuits. Batteries would be perfect, it's too bad they don't work yet. Plus the cost to purchase, it straight up doubles the pesos. So again with the fossil fuel stepping up to cover the base load.
Commuter, sky polluter, ride my scooter, climate movement. Computer, Wi-Fi booster, fly juicer, hi-fi music. Clean energy means everything, everything. Bright future, clean energy means everything. Bright future.
So here we go, yo, what's the scenario? The carbon footprint is low in France and Ontario. The way they chose to carry the load is scary to folks, but the resulting quality of life there is very dope. Look at what they did in Sweden, low emission Sweden. Took the power grid and cleaned it safely. Ask a physics teacher, 50 years of nuclear waste fits in a single arena. And nature is more radioactive, check a dosimeter reader. Carcinogenic coal ash kills 500,000 people every single year after leaving them feeling a little wheezy. Replace particulate coal with fishing and breathe easy, so people will get a little heated, but I don't give a millisievert. You wanna fight climate change, fight nuclear decommissions. Replace fishing with fossil fuel and you increase emissions. Keep that clean, efficient energy in the system. How is that politically divisive?
Commuter, sky polluter, ride my scooter, climate movement. Computer, Wi-Fi booster, fly juicer, hi-fi music. Clean energy means everything, everything. Bright future, clean energy means everything. Bright future.
Abundance, That's what happens when everything functions. 1 billion people today still have nothing to plug in. Every third of a second another one comes in. No judgment, just take the power production number today and double it. And every solar panel plan is just keeping up with new demand. Burn baby burn, another natural gas plant. The air is a trash can for fossil fuel when you're burning it. But frack that, we have a zero carbon alternative that's so radioactive you can't discuss it calmly. A nuclear reaction to a sensible energy policy. I'm afraid of a meltdown, but only psychologically. In response to a technology that produces juice constantly. Is it dangerous compared to what fairy dust? It's safer than other major energy production areas. Climate change is scary enough, even with various solutions at play. Take one of the biggest away and it's gonna bury us.
Commuter, sky polluter, ride my scooter.